We're 4 friends who live across the globe
and share a love of Bon Appetit's YouTube channel.
So we came together to bring you our thoughts on what BA serves up.
And try our hands at recreating their dishes.
Welcome to Bon Appétit!
All right, so I think we start with the hello. So that's you, Amanda.
Oh, that's me. Sorry.
No worries.
My bad. Hi, I'm Amanda.
Hi, it's LJ.
And it's me, Meg. And once again, Justine is not with us for work reasons, but rest assured that she is editing furiously behind the scenes and, as always, is here in spirit.
Yeah. We
love you, Justine.
We do miss LJ. Or not LJ. LJ's right here.
Nobody misses me. I'm always here.
Welcome back to another episode of Bon Appétit. As always, we're going to kick things off by talking about what we've been cooking up in the meantime. LJ, do you have any stories to share?
So, I've been getting into packed lunches. I've decided it is no longer feasible for me to keep buying lunch when I'm at work. I really need to get into the swing of things. I think a few years ago I was a lot better at it when I was paying attention to what I was putting in my body, and I think I kind of got out of that habit, and then I was just like, oh, just grab something from the local sandwich place or salad place or whatever. And I'm like, no, it's a waste of money. You can just make stuff at home. And I have dug out on the Bon Appetit website, I have found a recipe for something called Just Keeps Getting Better lentil salad. And I think they must have posted about it on their Instagram or in their newsletter or something like that, because I clicked on it and I thought, oh, this is interesting, because it's a salad that you make a big batch of and it stays good, if not better, throughout the week. And I was quite skeptical because I was like, surely salad just goes all limp and disgusting after the first day or so. Mm-hmm. But this is made with kale, so it's a really hardy leaf, so it doesn't go all limp and weird. But also lentils that, you know, keep for at least 4 or 5 days. And then there's some feta. And then what you do is you almost deep fry like nuts and I think it's almonds and scallions, so they're really kind of crispy, and then you kind of mix them through and use the oil that you fried them in as the basis of your dressing, so it's all infused and delicious. And it was just great. Like, I just made a massive batch of it on a Monday and it just kept all the way through till Friday, and it was just as good on the Friday. Like, it didn't sog out, it didn't get weird or mushy, or I don't know, it just tasted the same as it did on Friday as it did on Monday, if not better, because the flavours had infused more. And I was just really impressed. And I'm like, I won't have it every week because it would get a bit samey, but I was just really, really impressed. And I'm going to do that. It's going to come into my kind of regular rotation, I think.
I would be suspicious of those claims too, but that sounds awesome. And I imagine maybe the kale might even get to a nice softness, perhaps, as it goes on.
So it does tell you to massage the kale, because otherwise it's just really weird and it's almost like dusty looking when you first get kale, isn't it? But if you massage it with salt, then it kind of goes all kind of glossy and softer. I recommend that if you're looking for a lunch recipe.
Yeah, I'm not really team kale, but you may have convinced me to try this because I do make my own lunches every day, and this sounds like a really convenient thing to do.
I am team kale. I have a team kale sweatshirt, actually. You know, like the one that Beyonce wears in the 7-Eleven video. I went out and got that.
Amazing.
So, yeah.
I don't know. It depends on how the kale is done. In my family, we tease my mom a lot because she has really tried to push kale on all of us. But
Kale
like
pusher.
in a weird way, like she'll
pusher.
make a regular dish and then just like put kale in it. And we're like, I don't know if that's how that's supposed to work. Like,
I think if you don't prepare it well or you put it in a dish like without much thought, it can just fall flat on its face and it's just like, why is this here? It's not great.
So, Amanda, you haven't been making a bunch of kale-infused recipes?
I have not. No, I haven't really done anything other than had pizza ordered a few times with
that also sounds
family.
Good.
Pizza is always good.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, what about you, Meg?
I made a couple of Bon Appetit recipes. The first I made was the Nutella brown butter Crispies. So these are basically fancy Rice Krispie treats. Really good because, of course, Rice Krispie treats are good. But the big differentiator is obviously the browned butter. So there's a lot of butter. You brown it to give it that nice sort of extra kick of flavor. And then you stir in a whole bunch of Nutella in with the marshmallows. And one thing that I really like about Bon Appetit's dessert recipes is that they're always sure to add just a touch of salt. And I think that this really helps with sweets. And they've talked about this on the YouTube channel about how salt and sugar are so complementary and that it really makes sense to put salt in a dessert. And I totally agree.
Yeah, I'm into it.
They were a big hit at the party I went to. And this particular recipe had optional red luster dust. And I'm like, as fancy as that sounds, I don't have any on hand, so I'm not going to add it.
Dust? What the hecking heck is that?
It sounds like, I don't know, sanding sugar, but dustier. I don't have any in my cupboards currently.
But red Leicester's cheese, right?
Not Leicester, luster.
Luster.
Sorry. I was like, I'm having a Chris moment. Red Leicester dust.
Red luster dust. That was...
Sorry, that was a Brit-US translation fail.
I love it. But speaking of Chris moments, I also made a Chris recipe. Cheesy grits with scallions and jammy eggs. It was really good. And I substituted the standard jammy eggs for Bon Appetit's soy marinated jammy eggs just because I had made them for miso soup and I had some left over and I thought, I'm sure this will go well with cheesy grits. And they did.
They did.
Can I
great.
ask, what are jammy eggs?
As far as I can tell, this is just BA's way of describing a certain method for soft boiling eggs. So it's a very soft boiled egg to the point that the yolk has a sort of jammy consistency.
It's my favorite type of boiled egg.
I really like it as well.
Yeah. Yeah.
And finally, I made a chicken katsu sandwich, but more details on that to come. All right, so let's get into it. On the menu for today's episode, we have a whole lot. We've got an 8-course meal going on here.
I wore my stretchy pants.
Loosen your belts now. Yep. First is professional chefs compete in a knife skills speed challenge, followed by Carla makes a giant blueberry pancake. Molly and Adam make broccoli bolognese. Then Chris makes veggie burgers, followed by pastry chef attempts to make gourmet M&Ms. And then we have Andy makes skirt steak with Romesco sauce. Moving on to recreating Maangchi's Dakbokkeumtang, aka spicy braised chicken from Taste. This is one of those reverse engineering episodes. And finally, 12 types of rice examined under a microscope and cooked.
Yeah, that was a sneaky one that came in just before we recorded today.
Right before recording. So let's kick it off with professional chefs compete in a knife skills speed challenge. What did we think of this one?
I enjoyed it. I thought it was a fun challenge, although I kind of like that the conclusion that they came to at the end is that actually no one, like your average competent home cook, doesn't really need to know any of these skills, and actually they don't include them, that they don't call for them in any of their recipes for a reason. Because it's just, it doesn't matter. Do you know what I mean? And I use the rough chop method, so I would be absolutely useless at this. I mean, I thought at the beginning of watching this that Molly or Andy would be fastest.
Me too.
I guess I just always got the vibe that they were good, had great knife skills and would be able to put them to the test in a speed challenge. Kind of they'd come up well. But Molly did do well. I think she came second. Is that right?
I believe so.
The final leaderboard. But Andy was really on the lower end of the leaderboard. Like he
was last.
Anywhere near the top.
Last.
Yeah. So really surprised by that. But I guess the point is not necessarily. I felt like a lot of them were just kind of like, you don't need to. The speed is not the thing. Like it doesn't matter how fast you do it unless you're working on a kitchen line, you know, it doesn't matter. So a lot of them, I feel like a lot of them kind of noped out in spirit.
Brad especially.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. I wrote the same thing, that I thought Andy was surprisingly slow. But when I like rewatched it again earlier today, because I had watched it like 2 weeks ago when it first came out, I noticed, I think part of it is he got really caught up in describing what he was doing to everybody.
Yeah.
And like really, really going through the process, which I feel like Molly did to some extent, but like she was still like going at it.
Yeah.
Whereas he was, well, taking more time and really explaining it. And overall, it seemed to be like, it's not about the speed, it's about having the skill. And so I think maybe Andy does have really good knife skills. He's just not super fast at it. With everything in life, it doesn't matter about the speed so much unless you're like a sprinter. Like it just... I do think that I liked this challenge better than the weird carrot plating one. Because at least it was something that there were very defined rules of what was going on.
Yeah.
And at the same time, pretty much everyone was like, yeah, this is kind of stupid.
Yeah. The general consensus among the chefs, I agree, was definitely results and execution over speed, and also safety over speed, which is, of course, important when you have very sharp knives. I was also in agreement with you guys about, I predicted that Andy would do much better, and then he was dead last. Molly's maybe just so competitive. Perhaps that's why she eked out closer to the front of the pack there.
She also was the first one to realize that you should just square it off, because then it's easier to chop,
because
and
yield
like not worry
matter.
about exactly. It didn't matter like how much you got out of it. Like exactly. She had that competitive mindset right from the beginning.
I also liked this one better than the carrot plating challenge because it was really interesting to learn about everyone's backgrounds and sort of the difference between an academic education versus learning from experience and learning from back of house restaurant work. And it was interesting to see the various perspectives. Like we had people like Brad and Chris who went to culinary school, and they pointed out that these sort of finicky, precious French cuts are really about teaching you discipline and focus and attention to detail and being able to follow instructions, whereas it's not actually an everyday skill, as they said. It's not how they cook in the test kitchen. It's not how home chefs cook. But there is some benefit to that formal training for those reasons that they pointed out.
Well, it was one of the cuts. Was it Macedon? I don't know how to pronounce it.
That one.
The one that Emil keep calling Mademoiselle, which I thought was funny. But like, I'd never even heard of that one before, let alone be able to tell you when you might need to use it. Like, I just think it's one of those things that French chefs do to, like you say, it's like a drill almost to like train people.
Yeah, Brad seemed pretty concerned about A, doing that cut, and B, pronouncing it.
Yeah. It was funny because that whole training and background conversation is something that comes up later in another conversation that we have in another video. It was kind of a sort of a mini theme of this set of videos. But it's interesting to hear their experiences of how they got to where they are. They're basically all at a similar place. Well, they're all physically at the same place now, but like in terms of career-wise, how they've managed to all get there separately. And there's many different routes into it, which is quite interesting because I feel like maybe 10, 20 years ago, you wouldn't have necessarily have been able to just get to a high professional chef level just through experience. You would have needed to have gone to culinary school. So I think it's good that it's more accessible and there are different routes into that profession now.
Totally. I was really encouraged to hear how many people got there through experience. I think that's really important. As you said, there's a lot of gatekeeping in that profession with, you haven't gone to culinary school, we're not even going to consider you. Yeah. And there's a lot of gatekeeping in a lot of other careers and platforms and industries as well, where it's like, you don't have a formal education, too bad. So I think there's a lot to be said for practical experience.
Especially as education is becoming more and more expensive these days.
Indeed.
People just can't afford it. So, yeah.
Yeah, definitely. And one of the things I thought was kind of interesting was that I think Brad has mentioned this before, but the way that Brad sort of does stuff in the kitchen doesn't make you think he's a culinary school guy. Like, he's a little bit more like fly by the seat of his... Yeah, tossy toss. Like he's just sort of winging it a lot of the time.
No, he's all about precision.
That's what he said that one time. But you know what I mean? Like it's just kind of funny to like, I would have thought, I knew Andy had a restaurant background from reading like a profile that an interview that he did recently. But I thought it was kind of interesting. I guess I would have thought that like maybe Molly had more of a culinary school background than a restaurant background. Just kind of.
She's from the streets.
Yes, as we learned in a couple of videos. Yeah. So I just thought it was kind of interesting to see and that Gabby had the culinary school background too. Mm-hmm. But even she was like, you would never actually do this in real life. One other thing that I liked towards the end of this video is that Brad was like, you know what I don't like? Food competitions. America is too obsessed with competition. And I was like, agreed, Brad. Agreed.
Yeah. What are you trying to rush for, bud?
All right, moving on to the next video. Carla makes a giant blueberry pancake. So I wanted to start off with a question for you guys that I feel like is kind of contentious. Do you think this is a pancake? Because I would not consider it one. But I'll get into that in just a moment.
I am kind of with you, Meg. I felt like it was more of is flan the right word? Or like I don't know, like a sweet omelette almost? I don't know. It just wasn't, it was too big and poofy and cakey to be a pancake. Like, I think of pancakes as smaller things you stack. You couldn't stack that. That's ridiculous. Unless you were a giant.
That's a good criteria. I hadn't thought of stacking when I was thinking, but I completely agree with that. I also got the impression that it was too cakey. And Carla seemed to get out in front of that by saying, it seems cakey, but it's not. And I'm like, color me unconvinced.
She also said we're putting the cake back in pancake at one point.
Yeah, she did say that.
She did say that.
It seemed more like a breakfast casserole kind of thing to me.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
I also think another must-have for pancakes is that both sides have to, quote, see action. They have to be browned by the pan. And one thing that I love about pancakes is that they have those nice, light, bubbly edges. So you have the brown sort of disc, and then you have the light, bubbly edges. Yeah. And this just didn't have that at all. And only one side was browned by the pan. And it's also very tall and very round, whereas pancakes are flat.
It was a breakfast frittata, like a sweet one. Like, it wasn't, I don't think it was a pancake. I mean, I'm not necessarily against having a breakfast frittata. I just don't think you can call it a pancake.
Yeah, I mean, don't get me wrong. I would absolutely devour this if it were served to me.
Well, actually, you say that. It's interesting. So I do like blueberries, okay? But I have a weird thing about hot fruit. Like, I'm quite... I'm quite, like, sometimes I like it in some contexts, but other times I'm like, oh no. So, like, it took me ages to work up to liking an apple crumble. So I feel like with blueberries in a pancake, I've never been a massive fan. But then I was like, well, but I guess you could switch the concept to using, say, like chocolate chips instead. But then she vetoed that at the end. And I was like, but why? So I don't know what I'm doing with it.
I agree with you of chocolate chips. Why not? What the hell, Carla? I love you, but why? No joke. LJ, one of my notes I wrote down was my weird feels about blueberries.
Oh, okay.
See, I'm like the opposite of you. Not with fruit in general, but specifically blueberries. I don't like fresh blueberries. They taste weird to me.
Oh, no.
But you bake them in like a muffin or a scone or a pancake, and I love them.
Oh, okay. Oh. I was really afraid that you were going to say my most hated thing, Amanda, which is use frozen blueberries for your muffins or your pancakes, which to me is like a cardinal sin. So
no.
I was really concerned.
No, it's just like, if you just like give me a plate of blueberries, I'm just like, eh. But if you bake it in something, I'm like, I will eat all of it. It's like, I don't know what it is. And I'm not that way about other fruit, but blueberries in particular, I love a baked blueberry, don't like a fresh blueberry.
You guys and your weird blueberry opinions.
I have got weird blueberry opinions, and I'm not sure why. The other thing, though, with the blueberries is that they all just... And the way she cooks this pancake, in inverted commas...
Emphasis on cake.
Whatever it is. They all just sink to the bottom because you can't flip it. So I'm just like, there's no even distribution there. I don't know. I think there's a flaw in this recipe. I know that Carla came up with it in the shower, but I just think it's not quite what it needs to be called be called a pancake, and B, I don't know, like you say, I would probably eat it, but I just feel like it's maybe not the massive triumph that Carla wants it to be yet. I have faith that she could tweak it though.
Yeah, I agree. I wanted to love it, especially since she seems to love it so much, but it's not a pancake.
Really, like, it seems like a really good breakfast thing, especially if you were doing like a big breakfast for like your family's in town or brunch or something. Like the one woman said, you know, I'm having a sleepover party with my girlfriends, and so this will be perfect. And I was like, I want to have a sleepover party with my girlfriends. But, you know, I do think it would be good for that. It comes down to the naming of it.
Yeah.
For sure. Like Bolognese.
It promises a thing it can't deliver.
Exactly. I did really like her quote about how the idea came to her. She said, "Born from the creative juices that floweth like the hot water upon her weary bones."
It's so poetic.
It's very poetic, Carla.
Amanda, if you wanted to do it with chocolate chips, you could. But you'd like it with the blueberries.
I would. Have you ever had a blueberry pancake, LJ?
No, I would rather have a stack of hot pancakes with fresh blueberries on top. Like, that's fine. There's something about them when they're cooked. They just go weird and mushy. I don't like mush. I think that's what it is. It's the texture.
I can understand that. I just want to like make you a really good blueberry pancake so you can see how they can work really well, but they have to be done right.
Well, I want to make you a really good soup so that you can see. I'll make you a soup and you can make me a blueberry pancake for dessert.
Recipe exchange. If Justine were here, I'm sure she would be pro chocolate chip.
Okay, that makes me feel better.
Yes, I think so. My last thing was just when Carla was talking about her grandma saying, like, I just want a piece that can only fit on the knife. Like, when you're slicing a piece of cake.
That's such a grandma thing to say.
It is such a grandma thing to say. I had mentioned, like, my one grandma who did, like, the angel food cake a few episodes ago. She would do the same thing. She would be like, I just want the tiniest sliver of a piece. Just, like, just eat a piece. Just, it doesn't matter. Yeah. Just eat a freaking piece.
Calm down.
So speaking of dishes that are perhaps inappropriately named, we're moving on to Molly and Adam make broccoli bolognese. LJ, I'm guessing you have strong opinions.
What the heck is a bolognese, guys? The word has no meaning anymore. I've said it so many times since we started this podcast. I don't even know what we are, who we are, where we are, and what is happening. Broccoli bolognese? I'm sorry. I just... First of all, I am not a massive broccoli fan. Certainly not that kind of broccoli. I like the tender stem broccoli much more. Like, that's more kind of like asparagus like, in my opinion. So this kind of what I call tree broccoli, because it is like a tree, I'm just never a fan. Like, it doesn't matter how you prepare it, it never tastes great to me. So to get your potato masher up and mash it up with some sausage and serve it on pasta, and then add insult to injury to call it a bolognese, I'm sorry. No, I'm just saying no to this one.
Well, they did at one point say bolognese, and I thought to myself, is that how it's supposed to be pronounced? I was also confused. Okay.
That is how you say it in Italy.
Adam basically only said it was because of how it sounded, and I wrote, I'm all for alliteration, but what the fuck, Adam?
No.
Like, that's, you can't just make it up. I don't know.
I'll just call it by its third name, Brocco Bolo.
Yeah, fine.
One thing this dish had going that I did like was the pasta, the orciette. Is that how you pronounce it? The little ear
They're like
pasta?
little ears. Yeah,
Yeah.
they're cute.
Molly said that was her favorite kind. It's probably my second favorite. I think my first favorite shape is the campanelle. Campanelle? I
What's
can't
that?
pronounce words.
Oh, is that the one that's like a spiral?
It looks like a little bell shape almost, and it kind of has like
Oh.
rippled edges.
Oh.
Do you guys have a favorite type of pasta?
It depends. So for me, it just depends on the sauce because
Well,
different
that's
pastas
true, yeah.
are made for certain sauces. But I do love like a pappardelle, which is a really like thick version of tagliatelle. So it's what I did my version of Andy's bolognese with, like the really thick pastas. But if we're talking like short pasta, I kind of have a soft spot for macaroni, just because I love macaroni cheese so much.
Yeah.
So yeah, that's cool. But yeah, the little ears are cute. I like those too.
Rotini is my favorite,
Mm,
followed closely by shells.
Shells are also good for mac and cheese.
They are.
I like it. Doesn't for both of those for me. They both really with any kind of sauce, like they soak it up and it gets in like the little thing.
Mm-hmm.
I think both of those for this quote unquote bolognese could work really well. And again, this is like me being the opposite of LJ. I love broccoli and I prefer the tree part to the stems.
Mm.
And so a lot of this, I was like, oh, this, I would actually eat this. I just hate what you're calling it. And I hate everything that Adam is doing.
I got really irritated by Adam because I feel like he was just running roughshod over Molly's carefully thought out preparation and recipe. And I don't know if it was her recipe, but she clearly knew what the recipe was supposed to be. And he was just like making it up as he went along and like changing things. At the beginning, it was kind of funny, but by the end, I was like, he just needs to shut up.
So it was Adam's recipe. Apparently he
Right.
developed it. But Molly's obviously the chef. He knows
Yes.
this. We know this. Molly knows this. He was definitely being a sort of know-it-all right off the bat. And
Yes.
just dropping that he had gone to a few cooking classes. Again, what we were saying before,
Yeah.
cooking classes versus having loads of experience like Molly
Yeah.
does.
Yeah. And like, I loved at the end, she got the last word because he was said something else about having gone to school. And she was like, yeah, that's super relevant.
Yeah. I had so many feels about him. I felt like Molly had to babysit him.
Yeah.
When she was
she
like,
definitely
how about
did.
you like just leave the sausage alone, let it get a little crispy. And he's like, I just want to touch it. And she's like, but don't, like, just don't come over here. Like, I really felt like she was babysitting him. His cooking class experience seemed incredibly dubious to me because I was like, did you just go and take some like night classes for fun?
That is what it sounded like.
Yeah, I'm like, that to me does not mean like suddenly you know what's going on in this situation. I just was like, he may be the editor-in-chief of Bon Appetit, but in the kitchen, he seems like me. The way he's like bumbling around and like he doesn't know what pans to use and he didn't preheat the pan. I was like, I do that. I did that in my last solo episode.
Yeah,
I forgot to preheat the pan. Like,
Yeah.
I'm like, I expect myself to do that. And I think like what you said, Meg, is he had this know-it-all feel to him.
Yeah.
So then it was like, you know, he'd be like, oh, well, you should do this because of this. But then he didn't actually know anything about what he was doing.
No. And it was just like so clear all the way through that Molly knew exactly what to do all
Yes.
the way through, but he just wasn't listening to her at all. And that was what annoyed me because he was just like
Like the
disregarding
garlic.
her.
Yeah. Even though Rappo was being quite outrageous, I do like that they paired him with Molly because I honestly don't know if any of the other personalities would have stood up to him in the same way because
Yeah.
Molly is very no nonsense
True.
and she knows her stuff. And I actually think they're both pretty similar personalities in a lot of ways. They both have really strong opinions. I would say they're both contrarians, you know, they're always disagreeing. So it's kind of interesting to see two, I think, similar people butt heads, but in a kind of lighthearted way. It's hard to tell
Yeah.
how much is being played up for the camera and how much is authentic, but ultimately, I did get the impression that Molly was not that annoyed by Adam's antics. I think she was more like, oh boy, this guy, you know.
It is lighthearted most of the time, but I think there's also like a very real tension there where Molly's just like, Adam, shut up.
I don't know. He was just rubbing me the wrong way, particularly when he was like picking on Andy. Andy was just doing his job.
He was using his own station.
Yeah.
Right. And he kept going like, oh, look at you. You're trying to get attention. And I was like, he's not. You're the one that's calling attention to him.
No,
I think that this is one of Rappo's many attempts of trying to be funny, but then it just comes out mean. There's an old It's Alive episode where he comes upon Brad and he's like, I thought this was supposed to be funny. And it was him making a joke, I think, but it fell really flat. A little bit tone deaf in the humor department, I think. Oh, yeah. I was really jealous of their photography setup. I'm trying to take these nice pictures for our Instagram, and I'm like, I wish I had that marble countertop. I wish I had that much natural light.
It did make me think, like, when you have to take pictures for Instagram, you very quickly start to learn, like, where the good spots are for taking pictures, depending on the weather, like in wherever you work or live or where you have to take pictures. Like, I'm already, just from doing this for the last couple of months, I'm already like, okay, so at this time of day, this is good. At this time of day, that bit over there is good.
Yeah, Justine was giving me pointers recently. She was like, you're doing good with the lighting, but sometimes you're cropping it weird. And I was like, damn it!
We're all getting better. All right, next video. Chris makes veggie burgers.
A lentil burger.
A lentil burger, yes, to be specific.
Chris was hilarious in this video because I think it was another great quintessential example of Bon Appetit doing videos that don't go 100% right. But they show it anyway, and I love them for it because those burgers were not holding together in the slightest. I cook with almond flour quite a lot because it just settles better on my stomach, and I could have told him right from the beginning, I was like, that is never going to bind anything together. It's just going to make it crumble even more, mate. And he was like, no, I'm just going to put more in. I'm sure that'll do it. And I was like, no.
I mean, because the binding agent in flour is the gluten. And so then if you have almond flour, which has no gluten, it's not going to work.
And I just love that the little graphic pop-ups is like, eventually Chris will realise that the almond flour will not work. He put a positive spin on it, which is what I think you should learn to do as a chef, because no one makes a 100% amazing dish every time. Something usually will go wrong. Sod's law is that will happen. And what I like that he showed with this video is that, okay, I fucked up, but I can still make a palatable dish here. Like, there'll still be dinner on the table. Like, it's fine. I just have to be a little bit careful when I'm handling it, and we can get a good burger out. No problem. And that's what he did.
I'm not really into veggie burgers, though I was like, yay, a veggie burger for Justine, like, because we've had a lot of meat recently. And so even though this might not be something I would make, I thought it was fun and good that they were showing it. And he even talked about the whole, like, I know I've been calling it vegan, and then people were calling me out because I had the yogurt, but just use vegan yogurt instead. But the stuff that I enjoyed was a lot of the side things in this. Like, the Stranger Things discussion.
Oh, yeah, that was funny.
Where I'm like, who's calling it derivative? It's not. It's an homage. It's a loving homage.
I had the same note. I was like, what?
Yeah, show us this person who's calling it derivative, please.
We need to discuss. And I really, really want to watch a buddy cop movie with Chris and Andy.
Oh, yeah, absolutely.
100%. The Ban Marie and me.
I'm really glad they added that graphic on the end.
Yeah, it was great. Chris had some really hilarious turns of phrase in this video.
Oh,
when
he did.
Talked about, he talked about the mushrooms being the negative space in my burger matrix. I was like, whoa, what have you been smoking?
I made note of that as well. He says, if you will. And I was like, I will not. I have no idea what you're talking about, Chris.
I love mushrooms as much as the next guy, but I would never describe them like that.
Right? Going back to what you were saying about showing him messing up LJ, I also agree that this is, again, becoming a hallmark of Bon Appetit videos in general. And he says it's good to screw up every now and again. And it's showing that trial and error is the best way to sort of refine your own cooking style and recipes. But not only that, he turns it around and is very encouraging for the viewer. He says something along the lines of, don't freak out. It's going to go great for you. I have faith in you. So it's nice that he encourages the viewer at the same time. I was also listening to a podcast called Gouda Talks, in which they interviewed Claire. And the host of the podcast called this Bon Appetit's culture of error. And I just thought that was an interesting way of describing the vibe of the YouTube channel.
That's interesting.
That it's like okay to have errors.
Mm-hmm.
Well, I think it's not only okay, actually it should be encouraged, because that's the only way you learn, right? You can only learn through failing at something and improving on it for next time. So I actually think it's brilliant that they celebrate it and, you know, show that there's no problem to it. There's always a teachable moment in it. So I think it's great that they encourage people not to be disheartened or think, oh, I'm no good when something goes wrong. Because it happens to everyone at every level of cooking experience.
Well, that's something we've even talked about in our side dishes when we do like our wrap up with one of our co-hosts, and we talk about things that we've learned or we might do differently next time. And I think that's part of the whole idea that it's a test kitchen.
Yeah.
Is you are testing these things out, trying to find the best way to do it.
Totally.
I enjoyed when Chris tried not to play favorites with his veggie burger children, but then he totally did.
Well, yeah, because that spawned a meme that had done very well on Twitter. Several hundred.
Yes, thank you
likes.
for sharing our meme appetit.
Yes, thank you. I liked in this episode that right at the top of the episode, Chris was starting the discussion about the concept of veggie burgers, and there's kind of two paths that you can go down. You can either have veggie burgers that are really showcasing the flavour of vegetables and just trying to be a delicious patty of some description, or you have the route that you can go down where you're trying to replicate the sort of flavor and the texture of meat itself. And I don't know about you guys, but I've always been much more the former than the latter in terms of when I've had a veggie burger. Like I would rather, and I would say that for all vegetarian dishes actually, I do eat meat, but I do like eating vegetarian food, but I always prefer vegetarian food when it's just food that happens to be vegetarian, not food that's trying to be meat.
I absolutely agree. It's what we were saying before with the pancake. It's about setting expectations, right? So if someone gives me something vegan or vegetarian and draws the comparison to a dish that traditionally has meat, like if someone gives me a meatball and calls it a meatball and it doesn't actually have any meat in it, my brain's already thinking meatball, 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 meatball. And then when it's not that, there's a little bit of disappointment sometimes. So I'm definitely in the camp of let's just celebrate vegetables. Let's make dishes where vegetables are the star and we're not trying to imitate a meat burger patty or a fillet of fish or something like that.
I feel like you guys are blowing my mind right now because I feel like I've always gone into like imitate the meat because I like meat. And then I'm always disappointed. And I'm like, oh my God, maybe this is the way I solve it. Like, embrace the vegetable taste instead of it trying to be fake meat.
Embrace the vegetable. All right, we've got another gourmet makes on our menu. Pastry chef attempts to make gourmet M&Ms.
This is another gourmet makes that has made me really want to eat the snack. But I have been able to refrain from buying M&Ms, even though I was at the store and I bought Pocky for my husband for his birthday this past week. I even saw the candy aisle and I was like, no, don't go down it, because I was afraid I would just grab all the M&Ms. So I had self-control.
I have a controversial opinion to share, which is I am not a massive M&M's fan.
Oh, that's really funny because I was just about to say I've never met anyone who didn't like M&Ms. But...
Well, so the original version, just the chocolate version, I will eat it, but it's not my fave. But the peanut version that everyone goes nuts over, pun intended, I've never been a massive fan of nuts and chocolate. And peanut M&Ms, I've just never clasped to my bosom as a chocolate that is for me.
M&M's for me are one of those candies where it is so popular, so it's always been around and I've had it quite a lot. But honestly, it's a candy that I could take or leave. It's probably never, ever going to be my first pick if I'm at a movie theater or Halloween or anything like that. But I will gladly eat it if it is produced magically for me. But I'm not going to go out of my way to buy or consume them. Oh my goodness. This one was kind of painful to watch, to be honest. I felt
painful.
kind of down watching it. I think I was feeding a lot off of Claire's sort of defeated energy. And even though she called this a qualified success, I don't know, it kind of seemed like a failure to me. The look of it was essentially totally off, right? It was lumpy and splotchy and uneven.
She couldn't get that smooth candy shell. Like, it just almost seemed impossible to recreate.
I kind of feel like if she had been willing to try a few more techniques, maybe she would have gotten there. But I think because she had the month-long break in between, she was just like, this is what I'm doing, this is what I have. Like I was kind of surprised that after the month she didn't remake some
I was too.
base chocolate, like just the peanuts and chocolate.
Well, especially because that section or portion of creating the candies actually worked out pretty well. Like, it was kind of right first time, like just getting the peanut in the chocolate shell with that weird kind of make your own mold splotchy purple shit, which I loved. It looked great. I want to get some of that stuff.
I agree. I was really surprised that she didn't start over with the coating at any point. I think she did that thing that she often does where she just has sunk so much time into one path or direction that she feels that she has to see it through to the end, even though it seems like she knows it's not the right approach. I was honestly really surprised that she didn't use the coating that she did in the Skittles episode, the pastillage. This episode is just full of words I can't pronounce, but it was that sort of candy putty that hardened and gave the Skittles that smooth surface and the opaque white to then put the color on top of. I feel like that's exactly what she was stretching for in this episode.
That's true.
Yeah.
Instead, she kind of felt like she doubled down, like you say, almost like a sunk time. She was like, no, I've committed to this. I'm going to do it this way or no way. With that like weird shellac, food grade shellac coating. It was just soul destroying watching that happen because it was just so, and then I don't know, with all the layers of the sugar syrup and the royal icing, it just was unnecessary when, like, as you say, when we know there's a technique she could have used that would have given the right effect.
And especially because she does often go back to, okay, this is what we did in a previous one, and I have this skill. Like, because she killed it with the chocolate tempering this time.
Oh, yeah, that was like
Did
no
she,
problem.
though? She didn't ever do the test. I feel like she said, I'm tempering it, and then she put it in the molds, and then never actually verified whether it was tempered or not.
That's actually a really good point that I didn't pick up on. That's true. Well, okay, at least as far as the editing went, they didn't show us her having, like, a tempering chocolate meltdown.
That's true.
No.
That's true.
But I feel like if
Meltdown.
they'd added that in, I feel like if they'd have added that in before, then this would have been like an hour long. If she had had that done, because there was just so much like to talk about in terms of her getting that white shell bit right or wrong, as she as depending on how you call it.
Another thing I kept thinking about is the royal icing when she was doing the trying it and like dipping the royal icing, and she was even saying, oh, this is so much smoother. I thought, well, then why don't you do different colors of royal icing?
I think she was trying to achieve that layered effect, but that is a good point. She could have tried that.
That might have been a more even color kind of thing instead of the splotchiness.
Although I really like the look of those spray paint powder painter gun things. I was like, I want to play with those. They're fun.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So, you know how Claire mentioned that she really wanted a candy drum or pan and that she had been asking for one for, I think she said years. I was really intrigued by that. So I did literally just 2 seconds of Googling, and you can get a candy drum attachment for your KitchenAid mixer. So I was thinking, come on, BA, get her one.
Get her one.
I mean, granted, it was $700, but I think that Bon Appetit can afford it for Claire.
You can afford it.
Well, I mean, how much money have they wasted with Brad drilling holes in things over the years?
Or cutting up those silpats. Yeah, for reals.
I did like that we got to have Brad come in and do some sort of like...
MacGyver.
Yeah, like he's drilling into the salad spinner and she hates the sound. And I'm like, well, it's going to be how it
quite
is.
scared of the drill. And then when she was going to go and work out how to put the M on it, I was like, honey, you're just putting lipstick on a pig. This is not going to solve it.
To me, the worst looking ones were the brown ones, which literally...
They look like rabbit poop.
Yes, exactly. Looked like rabbit poop. I was just like, oh dear. And they only showed them like twice, which I'm glad. I think they knew.
They're like, just don't pay attention to those. Look the other way.
I would say, though, although when you look at them whole, they looked not great, the cross-section looked exactly correct. So
the cross-section did look really good. I agree.
Well, and everybody did say that they tasted good.
Did they though?
Chris said they did, and then she was like, I'm surprised you said that. They're a month old. And then there was this flicker of something on his face where he was like, oh.
I really got the impression that they didn't taste good either, which is why I thought this was a failure. I think that most of the compliments were around the peanuts, and it was like, well, of course you roasted some nice Virginia peanuts. They looked difficult to bite into, and Andy says, the shape is okay, and it's like, that's not exactly high praise now, is it? I don't know. I'm sorry, Claire.
I feel bad for Claire. I like that everyone supported her at the end, being like, oh, so they don't look great. Big whoop. Yeah. And I was just like, sure. I mean, it was what it was.
And I should say, before any of us watched it, Justine messaged in our Slack group, like, oh, that doesn't look like a very gourmet version of M&M's. And she's like, but I haven't watched it yet. And yeah, now that we've watched it, it still doesn't look like a gourmet version.
Claire.
Sorry,
we
Claire.
would not be eating them.
Moving on to happier things, Andy makes skirt steak with Romesco sauce. Okay, I'm just going to get my gripe out of the way so that we can move on to stuff we liked. I hated the sponsored content in this video.
Oh my God, I was going to say the same thing. So I had to make, because I was watching it with my husband on the sofa yesterday, and I went past the title card, and I just saw out of the corner of my eye before it flicked off that there was like an extra bit of text, and I was like, go back a sec, what did that say? And it was like sponsored by Rioja, or presented by Rioja, or whatever it is. And I was like, what? Have they done this type of sponsored video before? If they have, I haven't seen it, but then that's not saying a lot because I haven't watched every single video.
Yeah, not to my recollection either.
But also, by the end of the video, I was like, all they had was the shot of that bloody bottle in all the beauty shots. They didn't mention it. They didn't once say that it might pair well with it. It was just bizarre.
It was every single ad for me when I watched it was for that one.
Right. Okay, we were watching it on our TV, and when we do that, we don't get the ads midway through, or if we do, there's less of them for some reason. So I didn't get any ads midway through. So I was like, what is the point of this? Like, if I was Rioja wine, I'd be like, hang on a minute. You should have said something about the wine.
Well, that's the thing. I take Bon Appetit's product recommendations actually very seriously.
Yeah, me too.
And if they could tell me why they liked this wine, I might be more likely to be okay with the sponsored content. But I also might feel like, well, are they shilling? And see, that's the thing. I trust their recommendations because I believe that they're honestly telling me what they think the best product is without having an advertiser or a sponsor behind the scenes. So I just don't like anything about this.
No, it was weird. And the whole way through, I was waiting for them to drop in a line about the wine, and I was really worried it was going to be like forced rather than a natural sounding recommendation. But then they just didn't mention it at all. And I was like, what the heck was this? It was just really odd.
But aside from that, yes. actually a really fun video. It's interesting because I think that Bon Appetit is still trying to find what Andy's character is, so to speak. And just in a few of the more recent videos, they've kind of leaned really heavily towards Andy's goofy, Andy's silly. Oh, and he's also kind of sexy and saucy. So it's been a little weird, but I'm enjoying it.
He got sauce all over his t-shirt.
It's true.
He did.
Yeah, those close-ups of the sauce on his shirt were also nice close-ups of his biceps. So it was a little bit of both.
Did anyone else,
True.
On that note, in terms of them trying to push the kind of personality angle of Andy, did anyone else notice the massive innuendo in this episode?
With the nuts?
Yeah, oh my God. Me and Russ were absolutely falling about laughing because he said, I keep nuts pretty coarse. I just like seeing the nuts. And then he said, a lot of times I see the nuts, I pound it. We were like, what is happening? Maybe it's just our filthy minds.
There was definitely that more subtle innuendo, and then there was the in-your-face groping of the tomato.
Yes. Yeah, that was bizarre.
I know, right? That was weird to me. I did not appreciate that.
He said something like, this is probably somebody's fantasy. And I was like, why? Why is this someone's fantasy?
He was like, dirty guys. All right.
I like Andy a lot, too. He was quite silly in this episode, and I was proud of him that he did make a marinade this time. I was thinking to myself, it is a marinade.
I was like, is it? Because I thought the definition of a marinade is that you would marinate it overnight. Is that wrong?
Oh, are you looking at
Oh,
it,
you're
Amanda?
Googling.
Marination is the process of soaking foods in a seasoned, often acidic liquid before cooking.
Okay, so it is a marinade.
I also thought the dish itself looked really good. I loved the color of it. Those roasted peppers looked absolutely delectable. I liked the roughness of the chop as well. It was just a really sort of rustic looking sauce. I would absolutely eat this.
I liked how pepper heavy this was.
Yeah.
That the base was more pepper than tomato.
Yeah.
I know I've mentioned before, like, I like spicy foods. So this also, where he was like adding the smoked paprika and different things, I really liked all of that. Mm-hmm. Watching this video, I was so hungry the whole time. I was just like, oh my God, I want to eat this so badly.
I've learned not to watch Bon Appetit videos when I'm hungry if I can help it.
I should learn.
That piece of meat looks so good. Like the
it
marbling
did.
through the skirt steak. I was like, that is going to taste amazing.
I liked that Andy brought in his own mortar and pestle because he's done other videos where he likes to use that. So I like that he didn't use one from the kitchen, but brought his own from home.
I also like that he talked about having been in New York for 10 years, and then he talked about how although he's not originally from New York, he feels like a New Yorker, and he felt like that from the moment he moved there. And I was like, oh my God, Andy, I feel you so much, because that's how I felt, even though I was only there for a year. But like, I think it's something about the city, it always stays with you. So I loved when he talked about that, because I was just like, I get it, I'm there, it me.
I really related to, not to that feeling about New York specifically, but that feeling in general. I've absolutely had that experience. So I enjoyed that little bit of the video as well. And I thought of you, LJ, when he schmutz the sauce on the plate.
Yeah,
before plating.
do you know what? I did that at work the other day. I brought in some hummus and some like pre-roasted vegetables, and I got a plate out, and I was just like, I'm going to put my hummus on the plate like like I'm some sort of chef, and like everyone at work was like, what are you doing? And I was like, look how much prettier it looks though.
Next we have recreating Maangchi's Dakbokkeumtang from Taste.
Wow. As soon as I saw this pop up, I was like, this is going to be hard for Chris, because
yes,
I was like, this dish, I've never had it, but I imagine, because it's Korean, it's going to have a really complex flavor profile that it's going to be hard, even for a super taster.
I still was amazed, though, that he got some of those ingredients. Like, I know he missed more than he has in the past, but he was like, oh yeah, of course, it's this special ingredient and this special ingredient. And I was just like, Chris, Your tasting skills are amazing.
I was so happy that he managed to get the majority of the seasonings in the broth. Like, that's amazing. I would never be able to. I might have like guessed at gochujang because they just seem obsessed with it at the moment, but I would never, do you know what I mean? I would never have been able to get all the other complexity in there. I just thought it was really funny that the thing that tripped him up here, it was just something that was relatively innocuous, just like the thing that tripped him up in the previous videos. It was just like milk and a scallion was really tripping him up for a while. Like the way he was like, oh, it really seems like it might be a scallion, and I was like, because it is a scallion.
It is a scallion, Chris. Yeah, you just want to reach through the video and be like, Chris, trust your instincts.
I loved the moment in the grocery store though when he saw the red Leicester and he was just like eyeing it like, oh man, like there it is again.
Yeah.
I thought that was a perfect moment in this video because he says he doesn't want to have another, quote, red Leicester moment, aka walking past the key ingredient and missing something right under your nose. And the editing was just so good in this part because as he's saying this in voiceover, you see him standing with his back to a cart of apples. I thought that was quite masterful because, as we know from watching the video, he misidentified the apple as a Asian pear.
Yeah.
I felt so bad for him. I was like, he's going to be so disappointed.
I know. I get that you might misidentify and think that it's an Asian pear, given the style of dish that it is. But he knew that the pear, or the fruit, whatever it was in the slits of the chicken. Why he kept insisting on putting that together after they've been cooked. I am an amateur cook. And even I was like, if I got that in this kind of a challenge, I would be like, well, it's been cooked like that, because to do it after it's been cooked makes no sense. And even he knew that. Like, he got
did
to
know that. That was so baffling to me because he was so on the right track, but he just wasn't able to bring that thought over the finish line because he comments on how the construction and the plating is insane. And he says things like, why would someone do it like that? And you just want to shake him and say, because they didn't do it like that, Chris. You know that it's insane.
I feel like that was the thing Christina was trying to hint to him when they had their little powwow, and she's like, you know what to do. Like, I feel like she was trying to, like, mentally just be like, put it in between the chicken, but, like, without.
But then when she walked off and he was like, what does that mean? What the fuck are you talking about? I thought this episode was a complete joy from start to finish because I love watching his process of and his very logical, methodical brain trying to work everything out. Like, he even got asked for a sheet pan so that he could pull out each element and sort of almost like try and visualize without being able to visualize like what each thing is. And then he immediately drew it out on a sheet of paper once they'd taken it away. But on the whole, I think he did amazing. Like, I would be nowhere near the percentages that he managed to hit at the end.
Oh, me either. And I really agree. I love watching his deconstruction and reconstruction process. He's very analytical. He's also very self-aware of his performance, like that moment where he bumped down his grade to a C+, and at that point they were giving him a C-. It was just very aware of himself and that sort of methodical thinking through everything. He's a really interesting person to watch.
Yeah. I really enjoyed this video also. I wanted to shout out for Justine that we had the return of Chris in glasses. As soon as that came on, I was like, oh no, Justine's not here to gush about it. So needed to shout that out for her.
I think it's funny how Brad seems to be rubbing off on some of the other test kitchen staff, like when Chris calls them tubey tubes. I just imagine that's something that Brad would say about scallions.
Yeah. I thought it was also really funny when they revealed that it was Maangchi's dish, and Chris was so happy that he absolutely nailed it, and he did those finger guns. He was just so excited.
I was very happy for him nailing that too.
All in all, he actually also nailed the taste more or less, like an Asian pear here or there. He basically got the taste profile exactly right, which is his superpower. So he hasn't, done himself a disservice. The only thing he did worse on was the process of putting it together. But it's hard to tell the process just from tasting something.
Well, and there were ingredients like soy sauce and ginger, which were technically part of the broth in the actual recipe, but he put them in like the marinade for the chicken.
Yeah.
So it was like he had some of the ingredients, he was just putting them in a different
stage.
spot.
Yeah.
Yeah, he identified all the flavor profiles correctly, except for the milk.
And he was just put off by the fact that I guess Korean cooking is slightly different to what you'd be used to if you were trying to construct a dish of this type from a Western perspective. So the way that alliums all get thrown in at the end, whereas his instinct was always to do that first, because that's what we do in a lot of Western style cuisine.
Yeah.
If he'd thought it through, he would have been like, oh, maybe they are putting them in right at the end and not, but it's just, I just think he was just so close. He was so close.
Poor Chris. Get that man some spoons. That's all he
Yeah.
needs.
Yes,
That's all he wants.
toppings.
Is that so
It
much
is
to
all he
ask?
wants.
So one thing that may shock you, this is a stew, but this actually looked like something I wanted to eat.
Yay! I'm so pleased.
It was the spiciness that sold you, right?
It was.
Yeah.
It really was the spiciness that sold me.
Oh, we're all going out to buy gochujang after this, right? Because I feel like they've used it so much recently. It's something I have to have in my
I feel like
spice
we
cupboard.
have to, yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Gochujang and the
definitely.
gochugaru.
Yeah.
All right, wrapping up with our final video, 12 types of rice examined under a microscope and cooked. Or, as I like to call it, a meal nerds out over rice for 20 minutes, or a meal impersonates Babish.
Yeah, it is like a meal impersonating Babish. I never thought about that before, but you're totally right. At first, so I clicked on this and I was like, what is this? How can someone talk for 20 minutes about rice? But actually, the more he got into it, the more I was like, you know what? I really like rice. Like, I'm a big rice fan. And actually, this is super interesting and I'm really enjoying it. So he won me over completely by the end.
I enjoyed this a lot more than I thought I would, too. It was very educational. There were 12 different types of rice, which were probably 8 more than I knew of. And it was really interesting to get that sort of cultural, world, global view of all these different cuisines and all these different kinds of rices.
And what you'd use different rices for as well, which is interesting. Because I think when a recipe calls for rice, you just reach for whatever rice you happen to have. So it was good. I have to say, though, when he said 12 types of rice, I was like, I can't name 12 types of rice. But as he went through them all, I was counting them off. And I have actually eaten 9 out of the 12.
I didn't go through the whole list, but I was also surprised at how many I had actually heard of once they talked about
Explained
them.
it. Yeah.
But I was really interested by the Carolina Gold because I don't believe
Yeah.
I've ever had that. And the variation in the color looked really interesting to me. And I liked how he described it as sort of piney or juniper-y. I really like those types of, I guess, tree flavors. So I think of these rices, I might seek that one out.
I also like the dish that he put it together with, the Hoppin' John. I thought that sounded super interesting and it had an interesting story about it in that it's
I
something
agree.
that they make for New Year's Day. And I was like, but why? So I wanted to know more about that.
Well, the pork thing is a New Year's Day thing. Like my family, some of the background is German. And so my grandma was always like, you have to eat pork on New Year's Day.
Oh.
Or because if you don't, you won't have a lucky year. So if you eat pork on New Year's Day, it brings you luck. I don't know why that's a thing.
Because pigs are lucky.
I didn't like pork as much growing up, and she'd always be like, Amanda, you just have to eat one bite so that you can have a lucky year.
If someone forced me to eat pork every New Year's Day, I would count that the year already made. Like, woohoo, more bacon.
I thought it was so cool to see the different dishes and that he matched the cultural, like, not just like, oh, well, here's basmati rice, but we're gonna make some sort of American dish with it. Like, that he actually did something that was very Indian, and like the saffron, and oh my god, I love basmati rice so much, and I was just like, I want Indian food so badly right now.
As he was making all the different dishes, I was just like, oh my god, rice is amazing. Like, rice can do so many things.
Yeah,
I
rice
so
is
want
great.
some rice right now.
Yeah, just like you guys, I ended up I love a meal, as I have stated before, but I enjoyed this more than I thought I would. And even the little jokes that they put in, like
Yeah.
the way he would like open he's like, ice, it's not ice, we need rice. And I'm like, it's so cheesy, but I love it.
And the eggs as well. And he went, that's for another video. So I guess that's a hint as to something that might be coming down the track, right?
I was thinking it's either a hint or a reference to making eggs however many ways, which he already did.
Oh, right, yeah. I
Yeah.
guess you can't put 12 types of eggs under a microscope.
Which the microscope thing was cool, actually. Like, I was skeptical of that, but it ended up being really interesting to see the minutia of the
Yes.
details that were different from each different kind of rice.
And also how that translated to how they turned out when you actually cooked them. So, like, some of them that we were more familiar with, they cooked the way you'd expect them to. But, like, some of them, like the wild rice, when he lifted that cloche, I was like, whoa, what happened there? Like, they all just, like, exploded out of their shells.
I agree. I thought the microscope was going to be just clickbaity or just a gimmick, but then it was actually quite interesting. And there was a lot more variation than I was expecting. And also, I appreciated how Emil was able to talk us through the differences. Like, he made a lot of observations that I probably would not have made on my own, but just his descriptors I found very illuminating. I thought that the Rosmata rice looked the most interesting under the microscope. It had that striped kind of tigery look.
Yeah, super interesting. It was interesting how it lost a lot of that colour when you cooked it as well, because I wasn't expecting that to happen. So it was, very illuminating video.
The color change that I think I enjoyed the most was the first one, the black rice, because it became that like dark purple, like jewel color. I'm wondering if there's recipes for some of those dishes, because I just kept thinking like, oh my gosh, I want to try that. And again, like, I know some of them he was saying like you do with broth, but like I really like risotto, and part of it to me is it's not really soupy. You have more of like, and I liked it because the whole time he was describing risotto, and I'm like, and the cheese. And the cheese.
Yeah.
And then he's like, and the cheese. And I'm like, yes, that's the best part of the
rich,
risotto.
creamy situation.
But like so many of these dishes I thought sounded really interesting and are actually things I was like, you know what? I'm trying to expand my flavors that I'm trying and eating and, making. So I think it would be cool if some of those recipes were included.
I agree. I think I'm going to have to investigate on their website after we finish recording to see if they have recipes for all these.
Yeah.
I did also appreciate the dumb jokes. I liked the cloche puns, like cloche encounters of the third kind. But my absolute favorite quote was Emil saying, "I'm a messy prince."
Yes.
Oh my God.
When he was talking about the black rice, yeah. I also liked sometimes he'd say, like, ooh, handsome boy, or
Long boy.
That really cracked me up.
Emil also made some length and girth comments in this rice video that I think might have been interpreted other ways. So we've reached the end of our video recaps, which means it's time to talk about what our favorite videos were and which dishes we might make. Amanda, do you want to start us off?
Sure. So I'm going to start with what my favorite video was this time. And a little behind the scenes for the listeners, we were all talking before we started recording about how none of us were really sure which one we were going to choose at that time. But talking through it, I think the Chris recreating Maangchi's chicken dish, I do think that one ended up being my favorite this time. It was just a lot of fun. And we got a lot of good moments with Chris, and I liked Christina in it with him too. And then as far as making something, there actually were a lot of videos that I would be interested in making, but I don't know that I have the skills to do some of it.
Let's hypothetically say that you have all the skills.
Hypothetically had all the skills. I think I would do Annie makes skirt steak with Romesco sauce.
Yeah.
Because it just seemed really cool, but then like I honestly don't know that I have those skills. But I do think I have the skills for the giant quote-unquote pancake.
Okay.
We believe in you.
We'll work you up to some skirt steak.
Yeah, absolutely.
I think you can do it.
Well, because that was my thing. I was like, okay, I really feel like I understood the Romesco side of it. But when it came to the steak side, I was like, well, I don't know what's going to happen there. What about you, LJ? What were your feelings this week?
I'm like you. I think Chris is recreating Maangchi's Dakbokkeumtang. That's a terrible pronunciation. But yeah, that video was a delight. I really enjoyed it. I would say closely followed by Emil's 12 types of rice, but I think Chris's just pipped it for me. And if I was going to make something, I would definitely be making that skirt steak because that looked amazing. I'd probably try and do it with a side of rice because now just it's all I can think of. I really want some rice.
We're all really aligned because talking through it with you ladies, my favorite was also recreating Maangchi's Dakbokkeumtang with Chris. It was just a really fun video, really enjoyable to watch him at work. And I totally agree, LJ. Emil's 12 type of rice almost took first place, but I think that Chris edged it out just barely. And I think I would like to try that Hoppin' John rice recipe if I can find it on Bon Appetit. But if I can't, I don't know, maybe that Bolognese.
Oh, God. You're dead to me.
Are you going to do the potato pasta masher bit, though?
You know what? I think that was perhaps the worst choice of that recipe. Way to get rid of all the texture.
I have no time for him.
So we've got some shout outs to share. We always love when you get in touch with us on social media, when you share your thoughts on our episodes, when you let us know what you're cooking. We love hearing all of it. So we've gotten some praise for Amanda's Boozy Ice Pops episode. Margaret said that she loved this one. It was so funny. And keep at it, Amanda. And Sunny from the Book of Lies podcast also listened to the Boozy Ice Pops episode. She said she really wants a gin and juice a la Amanda. And she thanks LJ for educating her on gin. So Sunny's been really awesome about keeping in touch with us and communicating online, and she's listened to, I think, everything. She said also in solidarity with LJ, she hates bananas.
Thank God, someone else.
She would consider making the Nutella brown butter Krispies, but they might be, quote, too fancy. And she yummed over Justine's vegan quesadilla on Instagram. That earned a lot of likes and a lot of yums. Jen
great.
from One Person's Trash is Our Treasure also had a big all caps yum for that quesadilla. And we see you liking all of our stuff out there, Jen. So thank you very much. Erica from Les Represent listened, and she said she can't wait to hear Justine back on the pod, and we agree.
Yeah,
We
totally.
do.
We can't wait.
Jaslyn from Up in 10 Club podcast listened to LJ's Pozole video, and she actually has her own sort of Pozole song.
I think we need to hear this, Jasmine.
Yeah, Jaslyn, you need to send us in like a voice clip or something because all I know is it's Pozole time. I don't know about any other songs.
And she's on Team Amanda as being one of those not liking soup people.
Yes! I'm not alone in
You
this
guys
world.
just haven't had the right soup. Meg and I need to cook you a good soup.
We need a soup education.
My brother was teasing me about this yesterday.
And finally, thank you to Jasbine from Her American Story podcast. She let us know that she was cooking quinoa with pumpkin and sunflower seeds, chickpeas, and beef, to which I say yum and please invite us over. So yes, do get in touch with us. We love talking with you guys. And we also want to share a review. This week, our review comes from Heidi of the Vibrant Visionaries podcast. Heidi says, 5 stars when you want to celebrate food, camaraderie, recipe ideas, and Bon Appetit's YouTube channel. And then the little, oh, surprised face emoji. Oh. She says, I love finding interesting recipes and riffing on them, coming up with my own version. My favorites are simple. Salt, fat, acid, and heat, for example. Oh, that's another thing, Heidi. That's a TV show / book. She continues, slice an avocado in half, take out the pit, squeeze lime juice on it, shake on a sprinkle of salt, and your favorite hot sauce. Perfection. That's exactly why I love this Bon Appetit fan podcast. A panel of international hosts, ladies from the Lady Pod Squad community, bring a slice of their personal history with food preparation, a sprinkle of comedy, and they squeeze all they can out of their recaps of Bon Appetit's Test Kitchen YouTube shows. Enjoy listening as they try their hands at some of the recipes themselves or share their favorite moments of the previous week's BA shows. Thanks, ladies. Thank you, Heidi.
That's so nice, Heidi. Thank you. And I'm so pleased that my mere presence here means that we can be called an international podcast.
It's true.
It's true. I like that Heidi also gave us her own recipe in the review.
Yeah,
Yes, I
so
thought that was
clever.
very clever. Thank you for sharing your own little guacamole recipe or avocado recipe. So I think that's going to do it for our show today. Thank you for joining us this week. Next time, tune in for Meg, that's me, makes Chris's spicy chicken katsu sandos.
I can't wait. I'm very excited.
So excited.
Thanks for listening to Bon Appetit, a Bon Appetit fan cast.
We'd love to hear from you, so find us on Twitter, Instagram, and Pinterest at pod_appetit.
And on Facebook at Pod Appétit Podcast.
You can also email us at podappetitpodcast@gmail.com and find all of our episodes on our website, podappetitpodcast.com.
Until next time, the test kitchen is closed.
Hey everyone,
I'm Lily,
and I'm Britt.
and we're the co-hosts of Lady Shit with Lily and Britt. We talk about anything and everything related to being women today, like how much it sucks when people ask when you're going to have a baby.
Or how much we love Michelle Obama. And is there a right way to do self-care?
As doctoral students, we're occasionally smart, putting in a little bit of research into every topic we cover, but mostly, we're just ridiculous.
As the guy who sold us our podcast equipment said, you're the kind of smart where you really have to dig. If we sound like your cup of tea or glass of wine, new episodes of Lady Shit come out every second Tuesday.
You can check us out on Apple Podcasts, Stitcher, Google Play, and Podbean. Oh, and when you're searching, make sure Lady Shit is one word.
Yeah, and you have to substitute the I for an exclamation point. Why did we make this so hard to find? I guess the guy at the store was right.